Now, as I mentioned in the introduction video, I'm not going to spend very much time in this training course talking about traditional processing because you don't really need to understand all the details of traditional processing in order to sell cash discounting. And that's really one of the great things about it. You might be watching this video and you're like, I'm brand new to the industry. You didn't even understand half of what I just said in the last couple videos about payment processing, and that's totally fine. You're actually still going to be able to sell cash discounting really well if you know how to sell. Cash discounting kind of sells itself. I mean, you're literally going in and telling people right now you're paying something, and with me, you're not going to pay anything. That's very easy to sell. It doesn't matter how much you understand the underlying realities of it. The truth is you're going in and telling business owners that they're going to save $1,000 a month, $500 a month, $2,000 a month. It's really a no-brainer for them with this concept. However, I do in this video want to take just a moment to run through a few key terms. I have down here 4 key terms I want to run through with you about traditional processing. These are very high level just to give you a general understanding of how business owners are currently paying to process credit card transactions. Now, before I get to these 4 terms, we need to clarify that there are 3 different entities or 3 different types of organizations in the industry that charge fees to a business owner in order to accept payments today. Okay, so this is a traditional. This is not cash discounting. This is traditional. The 3 entities that that charge fees to merchants today are, number 1, going to be the banks. So I've already alluded to this in a previous video, but we have the issuing bank, which is the bank that issues the card. And then we have the acquiring bank, which is usually the processing company. It's the bank for the merchant that's acquiring the money from the issuing bank. So if I go into a business and I spend $100, then the issuing bank is going to say, hey, we issued that card and he spent that money. And so we have this $100. We are going to send this money over to the acquiring bank. Then the acquiring bank is going to give that money to the merchant, to the business owner. Okay. So we have those fees. And so we talked about, interchange fees, and that's that 1.7, 1.8% that gets held back. So the issuing bank doesn't send $100 to the acquiring bank. It sends like $98, so there's some money there. Number 2 is the card brands, okay? The card brands. So Visa and MasterCard also have fees. Now, their fees are much smaller in terms of percentage. Usually it's like 0.2, 0.3% overall that are, the total fees that they charge are very minimal. However, they charge those fees every time someone accesses their network to approve a transaction, to refund a transaction, anything that happens there. If it goes over the Visa or MasterCard network or any of the other networks, these card brands have their own fees that are really just like a toll. Think of it like a toll to go over a bridge. It's a toll to use their network. So they have fees they charge. Then the third one is the processing company, or the ISO, the independent sales organization. And so this is the company that is, actually doing the processing. And so they're actually doing customer service with the merchant. They're providing the equipment. They're working with them, doing support for the merchant. They're doing billing for the merchant. So they're doing all of the actual work and all the things. So they obviously have to charge fees as well to cover their costs to service the merchant account and also to make profit or margin. And of course, this is also where you come in. You work for that company. And so you, of course, want to make sure these accounts are profitable so that you can make some money as well by producing profitable business for the processor or ISO. And so we have these 3 organizations, so banks, card brands, and then the processor or ISO. All 3 of them are charging fees. Now, the interesting thing is when we look at a statement, it can be really confusing, a processing statement. And again, you really don't even need to understand all the statement stuff at all to sell cash discounting. But you will notice that there are 4 key terms that you're going to need to understand. So I'm going to give you the 3 complicated ones first. Then we're going to get to the really simple one that's going to make all the other ones kind of go away. Okay? So the first one is percentage fees. So percentage fees. Percentage fees are charged by the issuing banks. Most interchange categories are going to have a percentage fee. The card brands, they have what they call the assessments. So Visa assessments or MasterCard assessments, that's a percentage fee. And so every transaction, if it's $100, maybe the interchange fee is 1.5%, right? So if it's $100, they're going to pay $1.50 in that percentage fee. If it's $1,000, they're going to pay $15 for that percentage fee. So there are percentage fees that are charged on every transaction as a percentage of the transaction. Number two, there are per item fees. So per item fees, regardless of how large or small the transaction is, they're paying a certain amount. Maybe it's 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents per item or per transaction, regardless of the size of the transaction. Those are your per item fees. Okay. And again, the issuing banks, they charge per item fees. The interchange costs we keep talking about, there's usually a percentage and a per item that's charged. So it's 1.5% and 10 cents. Right? You'll also have with the card brands, they have something called a network access brand usage fee that they charge, usually around 2 cents. That's a per item fee. Doesn't matter how big the transaction is, they pay 2 cents on top of the percentage fees. Okay. Then you have the processing companies. They usually charge a transaction fee, 10 cents, 15 cents, and they have that per item or transaction fee. So we have percentage fees and per item fees. Now, those two make up, really 90% of the fees in most cases are going to be those percentage or per item fees that they're charging, even as high as 95%. Then we get into fixed fees. So fixed fees are fees that are charged monthly or annually. They're not based on the volume of the merchant or the number of transactions. It's just a flat fee that's being charged. So it might be a $9.95 monthly statement fee or a $29, terminal fee, or a $15 gateway fee, or a $129 annual PCI compliance fee. So there's all these different fees that are created in our industry that are charged to the merchant, usually from the processor or the ISO, that are charged directly to the merchant on an annual or monthly basis, okay? Now, how do we simplify all that into something that we could all understand and easily explain to a merchant, okay? Well, what we use is the fourth term, which is called the effective rate. I love the effective rate. The effective rate is this term that's going to simplify everything and make it so easy for you to have conversations with a merchant about what they're currently paying for. So an effective rate is very simply the total fees that the merchant is currently paying divided by the total volume. Okay? So if a merchant is paying $300 a month in fees and they're processing $10,000 in total volume, we just take 300 divided by 10,000 and we get 3%. So their effective rate is 3%. Now, some of that $300 is percentage fees. Some of it is per item fees. Some of it is fixed fees. But it doesn't really matter when we look at the effective rate. When we're talking about cash discounting, we just want to have a conversation with the merchant intelligently to say, you're currently paying 3%, 4%, whatever it is. With me, you're going to pay nothing. You're not going to pay any of those percentage or per item fees. Right? And so, when you look at these programs and realize, wow, we're able to eliminate such a big chunk of these, fees for the merchant. And in some cases, you can eliminate all of the fees. Everything is gone. So it's really an amazing program when you think about what you're able to do for that merchant. So again, we're talking about traditional processing and the way it normally works. The merchant is usually paying percentage fees, per item fees, and fixed fees. And when we talk about cash discounting, of course, our goal is to eliminate as much of those fees as possible for that merchant so they can really minimize those costs and get down to a point where they are not the ones stuck with this financial burden of accepting payment processing. So that's the end of this module. And it's interesting. That's it. That's all you need to know about the current industry and traditional processing. You just don't need to know very much about it. Here we are in about a half hour. We went through everything you need to know. Now let's move on to some modules where we get more specific about cash discounting, what it is, how it works, how to go prospecting, how to close deals. Let's dive into cash discounting now that you have just a very high level understanding of how our industry really works behind the scenes.